The boogeyman was just a fantasy.
You're not gonna get me, you're not!
They hunt human women.
Oh! Brian? You leave my baby alone! Kathy!
Who is it?
Angela, stage manager.
What do you want?
You got the part.
This play is a comedy about death.
You bitch! You fucking bitch! I can do whatever I want, you hear? You can't stop me! She's mad.
For you are surely not an actress's big brown freckle. And for your further edification, that means arsehole.
You're a tramp. You're a harlot. But then so am I.
That bitch shouldn't talk to you like that.
Did I startle you, dear old deviant?
Hi, this is Linda Day George, and the Hysteria continues.
Welcome back to episode 252, and this time we're going down under for Nightmares, aka Stage Fright from 1980, the very early, well, one of the early kind of Halloween-inspired slasher movies from Australia. So it's going to be an interesting one to revisit. I haven't seen it for a long time, so and I've finally seen it. Actually, reading back on my review, I was watching a very bad. So I had two copies. I think I had the UK pre-cert and the American video under Stage Fright. And the bits were cut out of both bits, and one was pan and scan. So finally seeing a kind of widescreen, high definition copy. Did it improve the movie? Well, it remains to be seen. But before we get onto that, we're going to talk about what we've recently seen. But before we get onto that, we're going to see how we all are, because I have a windstorm here at the moment howling outside. And I know you guys over in the States have got a winter storm coming. So if we do suddenly disappear, we're not being bumped off one by one. But Joseph, is it howling outside?
Well, right now it's just a little bit of rain and a little bit of wind, but the snow is supposed to start here in a couple of hours, and I think it's supposed to last pretty much all day, so who knows what'll happen. Okay, and the same for you, Nathan?
Yes, pretty much the same.
Well, I don't know about what's it like in Ireland, Erik. Are you being blown at the moment?
I'm not being blown at the moment, Justin. No, it's very, very sunny here, actually. So I'm the one. I'll keep the show on the road if you all disappear. Discuss Toya's new album.
Oh, she got a new album.
Yes.
Has she?
Yes.
SoundCloud's #1 record.
No, it's #1 in the hit parade. It's #1 in the States and in the universe.
Well, I think this whole episode's talking slightly about delusion, isn't it? So it's very apt you should be talking about Toya album that way. But before we get on to the main feature, what have we been watching? I know one of us has, I think we probably need to start with it. Obviously, we covered Scream 4 last time. And Nathan, you weren't be able to join us. But I know you're going to go and watch Scream 5, or Scream as it's called, today. But maybe, did you want to just give some thoughts on Scream 4?
I, just like the rest of the Scream series, I loved Scream 4. I thought it was a lot of fun. I did think they went a little too far with the comedy at times. Like, it seemed more appropriate for a comedy movie than for, a horror with comedy elements, I guess. As usual, I did not guess the killer correctly. But I will say that at the end when, no spoilers, but the killer is wanting to make it look like they were attacked as well, I thought that was absolutely hysterical. Because talk about going overboard. I mean, the killers in the original were just going to stab each other a couple of times to make it look like, they were attacked but got away. But this person is throwing themselves into walls and on glass tables and stabbing themselves. And I just thought that was hilarious. But no, I mean, I did watch it and I was preparing to be here, but unfortunately we had some family stuff come up. But yeah, I love Scream 4. I think it's a lot of fun. Just like I said, every other Scream in the series. And I mean, I didn't realize so many people disliked Part 3, honestly, because I love it too. So there you have it.
I think with Part 3, wasn't it? It's a kind of for me, it was kind of there's lots to enjoy in it, but it just felt a little bit safe. It felt a little bit like it was getting a bit too cute. That was the whole thing.
Mayhaps.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, Joseph, you have seen the new Scream.
Yes, I have.
So what were your thoughts on it? Sort of your non-spoilery thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a bit to process my thoughts on this one, and I would probably rank it alongside Scream 4, or maybe a tad higher, actually. I think, like that film, I thought it had a couple of standout moments, but I'm a little tired of cynicism and mockery acting as intelligent discourse in these types of films. I mean, the characters here, they aren't quite as insufferable as the characters from the previous film, but the bulk of them are just so bland with no real character development. And my God, that could not be truer for the new final girl, who is so bland and so morose that she makes long-suffering Sidney Prescott feel like a beacon of light and joy. And that's saying something, because Sidney's always so kind of mopey. The returning legacy characters, they amount to not much more than glorified cameos. And in the case of Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox, they look like they can't wait to cash their paychecks. I think David Arquette and Marley Shelton fare a little better, but not much. I think where Scream or Scream 5 or whatever you want to call it, where it really falters overall is in the writing and the direction. I mean, watching this movie, I realized how much I took the involvement of Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson for granted, especially Craven, who gave the previous films, even the overlit Scream 4, he gave it like scope and grandeur. And here it's, this is a constant game of like really tight shots and clunky direction. One of the forum members, I think it's Farmer Vincent, he said it best, and that the writing wise, this feels like a really sketchy fan fiction, that it's so desperate to ape the formula of the first Scream that the movie has no real identity of its own. I think Screams 2 through 4, they used the formula as a crutch as well, but each had they had their own feel and voice overall. This one introduces some really lame story contrivances and kind of empty fan service to advance the plot toward a near identical resolution to the 1996 film, and it ultimately feels just kind of played out and like half-hearted, and certainly not up to snuff with what Craven did in 1996. But like I said, there are a few standout moments here, including some neat little blink and you'll miss them Easter eggs, and this is easily the goriest and most violent of all the Screams, maybe combined. But at the end of the day, it's been there, done that, and exceptionally predictable. I mean, I guess the identity of the killer right off the bat, pretty much, and I think anyone worth their salt probably would as well. I guess it's what I would call watchable, but it's poor writing and the direction keeps it from being likable. So, I mean, if Scream 6, if it comes to it, they should do away with the kind of the snarky meta approach and just be a dumb popcorn slasher film like Scream 3. That's what I kind of want. Or like another forum member said, release the stab films instead. Those sound zany and a lot of fun. This was just kind of more of the same and just kind of cynical, and I just didn't really care for it. So, it's not terrible, but meh.
Are all the kill scenes more or less the same thing, where it's just Ghostface on the phone and then stab, stab, stab? And no variety? Is there any inventive kills?
I mean, it's mostly knife play again, but like I said, the lead up to the kills is certainly a little more kind of startling. I mean, they do some good jump scares, and the violence is just very operatic in spots, very nauseating even for a Scream film. It just felt almost kind of unscream-like. But I mean, overall, it's Ghostface is out stabbing people. I mean, it's the same thing, really.
Because I agree about that person saying they'd like to see the stab films, because I think they'd look really good. I particularly, as I said on the Scream 4 episode, I love the opening of Scream 4 with the double bluff where we're watching Stab 7 and then Stab 6, or the other way around.
Did I hear that there's, without getting into spoiler territory, but I heard Mark Kermode is like a movie reviewer in the UK, and he's his favourite film is The Exorcist, so he is kind of like got a good affection for horror movies. In fact, I think horror movies are his favourite things. But he said that there was a kind of bit of a supernatural tinge to it, which he said didn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying. Okay, let me see if I can do this without spoiling it. The lead character has visions, and at one point in the film, the visions seem to dictate the plot, and it's certainly, not in line with the previous 4 films, so I don't think it worked. It's not entirely supernatural, but it kind of is there. I don't know.
I guess it has. Was it kind of echoing? Because in the first film, Sidney Prescott had like visions of her mother, didn't she?
Well, she did in the third film, like, she had visions of Maureen in the Scream 3, and although there, it's just kind of, it didn't really dictate the plot, but this, I mean, literally allows one character to do something that they couldn't do without this vision. So, I mean, it just feels kind of very fan fiction-y. I
mean, do you think, again, without spoiling it, because obviously you said that the legacy cast, it felt a bit more like an extended cameo for them. Did you feel like this was handing the baton over to a new crew kind of thing?
It is. I mean, it is like, yeah, I get the feeling that none of the legacy characters will return. I mean, they may with a good paycheck, but it does feel like they're kind of passing the baton, but there's nothing really new to say. And I didn't care for any of these characters. I mean, they're not unlikable. They're just bland. I mean, very bland. A couple of standout characters like Jenna Ortega. She was in the second season of You. She plays the opening victim here, and she's really good. She has a bright future ahead of her, but I think she should avoid any future Scream films if she's got a head on her shoulders, honestly.
Do they get paid by check, or is it a bank transfer, do you think?
I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, hopefully by the time we record next, we would have all seen it. So I know, Nathan, you're going to see it this afternoon, aren't you? So it'll be interesting to see what your take is on it. At least, we'll hear from you next time. But Joseph, is there anything else you've seen you want to tell us about?
I mean, I've been kind of watching a lot of old canon films, but that's pretty much it. Nothing really horror-wise yet. I've been mostly watching all the kind of silly action stuff, so that's it.
Canon films are a blast.
Yes, they are. I mean, and for me,
that was my joke.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's funny.
Well, it's true. It's true as well, though.
My sides are splitting, Eric.
I apologize for that pain I've inflicted on your sides.
Yeah, for me, I would much rather watch the canon films than I would another Scream film.
Okay, well, fair enough. It's funny, isn't it, about how, because obviously we're a slasher movie podcast, and a lot of films, you can watch them over and over again, or like the Friday the 13th movies generally, are kind of not remakes of each other, but they're kind of certainly until they got to sort of part 7 or so, it was really kind of the same story over and over again. But you can watch it. For me, I can watch them over and over again. It's just with the Scream films, it's funny, isn't it? Some franchises they can get away with that repetition without people getting bored. But I kind of do you think I wonder if it would have been better if they set it in space.
Wow, I would definitely be excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you hit the nail on the head here. It's like the old films like Friday the 13th, they're jovial and likable, and here it's like they lean too much into that cynical approach, and they look down their nose at these films that they're mocking. And I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. It was cute and clever in 1996, but now in 2022, it's tired.
I think it's I think you're going to, also hit the nail on the head there. I think sometimes with the Scream films, especially as they kind of went on, you've had these kind of slightly, all the characters are quite jaded, like they've been there, done that kind of feel to them. They don't feel, like you say in the Friday the 13th movies or like the Halloween sequels as well. I mean, you had characters that are just a bit silly and a bit funny, but more real. Whereas everyone in many of the Scream films, it feels like they're a bit too cool for school. Everything is a joke.
Yeah, and therein lies the ultimate irony: is that I can't speak for you guys, but me, I walked away kind of feeling jaded. I like a lot of the newer slasher films, but for me, I can't really engage with them lately because I just don't care for the characters. And Scream is very guilty of that, and I don't think it earns, using the same name as the 1996 original by a long shot.
I hate that.
What's that?
I hate the fact that Scream 5 is just called Scream. I mean, I've spoken about this issue before. I have big problems with the Fast and Furious franchise because, I don't know, one of them is called The Fast and the Furious, and then one of the sequels, I think it's part 4, is called Fast and Furious. And I'm like, ugh!
Yeah, I mean, I don't like those films, but at least they don't take themselves too seriously.
No, but I'm just talking about the naming convention.
Yeah, the naming...
Why did they have to name it just another entry in the series? Oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that overall. It's kind of weird. But, I mean, maybe just titles aren't that important anymore.
Maybe. They are to me.
But they kind of, they had that whole thing, didn't they, for like obviously in the early 80s when the slasher movies, they kind of wore their numbers with pride, didn't they? You know, Friday the 13th, part 2, part 3. And then you got to the final chapter and it kind of is almost like they kind of get a bit embarrassed that it's, I suppose you don't get like James Bond part 26, I guess.
True, yeah.
Yeah, thump your chest and be proud of those numbers. I would.
So, okay, well, thank you, Joseph, and say it's going to be interesting to see what we all think about it. We were, say, if the stars had aligned and we'd all been able to see it, we were going to cover it as a main pick, and I'm sure we will do at some point down the line. But Nathan, have you seen anything you want to tell us about?
I watched Hell House LLC, and I thought I'd seen it before, but I hadn't. So this was a first-time watch for me. It's a found footage movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's like your basic, found footage movie, but I will say, like, towards the end, I mean, it does get pretty creepy. So, that's good. But I mean, it follows the formula of the found footage movie, just how you'd expect it to. Good setting, though. I thought the setting was really good. Have you guys seen it?
Yes.
I started to watch it, and for some reason I stopped. I should pick it back up.
I remember enjoying it, and I think I've seen there's sequels, isn't there? There's a couple of sequels.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the sequels yet, but I did like the first one. So
I remember it getting quite creepy because it's the one set in the haunted house attraction. Is that right? Where
yes.
Kind of, yeah. And it kind of gets increasingly sort of creepy because sometimes I think they like a film like Grave Encounters where it starts off slow and then builds up until everything is just like a roller coaster ride, but not necessarily in a good way because it just gets so silly and over the top. Everything flies out the window and you can't take it seriously anymore. Whereas I think if I remember correctly, this one it doesn't do that as much. It kind of it just gets more creepy as it goes along, which is good. So yeah, but you enjoyed it.
Yes, I did. Although I think probably my favorite found footage movie as far as scare factor is probably still The Borderlands or Final Prayer, as it's also known. I find that one to be very unnerving.
Borderlands is a found footage film?
Well, I mean, there's different movies called Borderlands.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's one of the alternate titles for it. It's also known as Final Prayer.
The ending is unbelievable.
Send me an IMDb link to the one you're talking about, because I'd kind of like to check that out, if you don't mind.
It's the one where they're investigating the church. That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one I'm assuming you're talking about, yeah. Which, as I said, that ending that's really eerie.
Wait a minute, I think I may have seen this. Yeah, it's starting to sound a little familiar, but send me the link anyway.
Yeah, we have talked about it on the show probably a number of years ago. It's not a slasher movie, but yeah, well, thank you, Nathan. Is there anything else?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, how about you, Erik?
Well, I've watched loads of things, but I can't discuss them because we're recording, I think it's next week or the week after, our top threes of 1997. So I've been swatting up on some 1997 films, and I can't really talk about them now. I did watch half of Scary Movie, speaking of Scream. I think a lot of the Scary Movie films have just appeared on Netflix, or maybe they've been there all along. But I said I'd give them another chance because I wasn't a huge fan first time around, and I can kind of see why. I got halfway through Scary Movie and I just switched it off, and I didn't like it at all. And now I'm keep getting reminders from Netflix saying, "Hey Erik, don't forget to watch the rest of Scary Movie," and I'm like, I don't think so. That's all I've watched.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm in a similar position that I've been sort of catching up on some 1997 movies, so I haven't really watched anything that I can talk about at the moment. So if you are interested in hearing what our top 3 of 1997 is, tune in to our Patreon. It's a nice little plug there for you. So, what should we get onto the main feature?
Yes, please, Mummy.
Well, here is the trailer for 1980's Nightmares, aka Stage Fright.
Nightmares, the screams of terror in the night, are silenced only by a sharp sliver of glass. Watch closely now, but don't dare look behind you. Just feel the skin crawl on the back of your neck. Something is lurking in the theater, and all the doors are barred, so there is no way out but down. Nightmares.
A little girl named Kathy tries to keep her mother from making out with a man while driving one day, and she inadvertently causes her mother's death in the car crash. 16 years later, Kathy has changed her name to Helen, has become a psychotic actress. Things are going fine until horrible things start happening with the cast of her new play. That is a rather slightly hilarious kind of synopsis from IMDb by someone called Ornas. I love the way that they describe, they kind of basically, the big spoiler is that Helen has gone on from this tragedy to become a psychotic actress. Now, if you're thinking that's a spoiler, it's not really a spoiler, because it's unfortunately, for Nightmares, it's probably its biggest problem is that it would have been better as a whodunit. And it's not. It's so clearly all the way through. It's clearly that Jenny Newman, who plays the psychotic Kathy, who for some reason changed her name to Helen and went from being Australian to American, is bumping people off in the theatre where she is an actress. But having said that, this is a film that I reviewed on Hysteria Lives many moons ago, and I used to have like the big box pre-cert, which was actually fairly heavily cut. I think they're missing whole scenes in it. And I had the American release under the title Stage Fright, which I think it was uncut, but it was like pan and scan. And if you remember the days of VHS, when you used to get those VHS, and sometimes a pan and scan, it was by a 4:3 ratio, and they would actually pan around the image, and it was very distracting. So having said that, it's a film that it's kind of it's got a lot going for it. It looks great. It's shot really well, even on a relatively low budget. It's got some very quirky characters. It's also incredibly gory for a 1980 slasher, and it's actually got lots of TNA in it. So if you're looking for that, although some people you possibly wouldn't want to see naked, it's one of those movies where you do see them naked. But Jenny Newman gives a completely unhinged performance, which is completely unconvincing. But is also quite hilarious as she kind of chews the scenery with gusto, which makes it kind of. I read back through my review, and it sort of is, I mentioned she looks like she's acting in a silent movie or on the stage. She does that thing where she bugs her eyes out and then looks left and right, and it's so over the top. But having said that, it's a fun performance. She went on to be in Hell Night the next year, and she was the sorority girl who loses her head near the beginning of the movie. But she can't carry this movie at all. It does make for a fun ride. And you've got lots of Australian actors and actresses that if you were a fan or you saw any kind of soap operas from the 80s in Australia, there's quite a few sort of familiar faces in there. So the film, it kind of revolves around these murders with the shard of glass, which again is a great kind of murder weapon for a slasher movie. You've got it's strange, and I think when we get onto background, the director John D. Lamond was saying it's a shame he didn't make a better movie. If he had more time, he would have made a better movie. But at its heart, there's actually a lot of things that work in it and a lot of things that don't work in it. I think for me, the biggest problem is that if it had been a whodunit, because the film plays with all the conventions of the slasher movies. Certainly, its main inspiration was Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978. Friday the 13th hadn't come out by the time this was being made, so that wasn't an influence on it. So it's got, it's got all the tick boxes. I mean, you've got I think it's even, they're kind of almost exactly the same date when little Jenny, or little Kathy, as she was then, inadvertently causes this car crash with her mother and her lover, and she manages to sort of kill her by pulling her back across the bonnet and cutting her throat. She does that, and then all these kind of things happen. She gets blamed for the death by her father. Then some I think it's an orderly or somebody tries to molest her, and then so it's the whole thing of the build up of a slasher movie is the traumatic event in the past is kind of played to a T here, and so much you've got like so much going on that it's clear that she's unhinged. Now, quite why she kind of then goes on to be an actress and then has a complete breakdown on the set of the play, but even while murdering people, she still manages to make her cues in the play, and she doesn't miss any of her scenes, which I think shows at least she's very organised. But yeah, overall, it's kind of, I think if they'd made it a whodunit, then I think it would have worked better. And I think as is, it's still a very diverting, like a fun movie, especially if you're a fan of exploitation and Australian movies. It's certainly a lot more fun. I would say this is, compared to something like Snapshot, aka The Day After Halloween. Again, that has its zany charms as well, but this is an out-and-out slasher movie, and it's one of the earliest ones. It was made, I think, at the end of 1979, so really directly influenced by Halloween. So if you've not seen it, then it's definitely worth a watch, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. So Nathan, first, this is one you hadn't seen before, am I right?
Yes, I had not seen it before, and I really liked it. I will say that in the beginning, it was a little slow moving, maybe, just a little bit slow for me. But I mean, as the movie progresses, it just gets more and more entertaining. And the last 15, 20 minutes are excellent. They're just fantastic, slasher, hijinks. I loved it. Just, a small complaint is, even though I did like the death scenes, I know that, they have a reason they have her killing with the shard of glass, but after a while it's I don't know, I kind of wanted a little more variety maybe, but it's okay. I was worried about how much bad luck she was going to get from, breaking so much glass. She broke some mirrors and stuff too. So, that's not good, for her. There's a scene early on that I loved. It's a false scare where one of the characters is working in the dark, and this masked figure appears out of the darkness. It's just one of the actors playing a joke, but I love that moment. I thought it was actually really creepy. And yes, I did guess the killer correctly because, like you said, it's not a whodunit. I mean, we don't necessarily see her doing the killing, because the killings are more of a POV. Kind of shot killings, but it's obvious, who it is. I mean that, I don't feel they tried to hide it at all. So I do think that, like you said, I think if it had been a whodunit, it might have fared a little bit better. I love the fact that apparently this play that they're in is terrible. Because there's a scene where the character George gets killed while they're watching the play. He gets stabbed in the back with the glass, and as he's laying there dead and some people get up to leave, they remark about how he's basically fallen asleep because of how boring it was. And I think the woman says something like, well, it wasn't that bad, and the guy's like, well, I nodded off a few times myself. And there's also the creepy critic who is just constantly
God, I loved his character.
The way he fills up on Jenny Newman's character, he's caressing her face and stuff, and then cups her boob in his hand, and it's just, I don't know, it's very handsy. And then later when the character Bruce is desperate to get a good review of himself, the critic basically alludes to, well, if you sleep with me, then I'll write a good review for you. And, for a minute there, I wondered if he wasn't going to do it, because he was just standing there like he was considering it.
Yeah, he's such an equal opportunity scumbag. It's great.
Yeah, he was.
So
I liked when the nude couple was attacked. I felt really bad for the woman, though, because she just gets slashed up all over. And, she's trying to get away outside in the rain. And Helen just, she's pretty brutal with that character. I don't think that character did anything necessarily to warrant her painful demise, but yeah, she gets a pretty brutal death. I get maybe it's just because she's naked and like there's just all this like slashing all over her body, and it's cringeworthy. But I liked it. I thought the final shot was great as well. Overall turned out to be a really fun movie, and it's got its flaws, but overall I was really glad I watched it and was surprised it took me this long to finally see it. Cool. That's my opinion.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nathan. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Joseph, how about you?
I can't quite commit to Nightmares either way. I hadn't seen this in a long time, so going into the film for the show, I had good, if a little fleeting, memories, but I found much of it kind of haphazardly concocted. It's like almost as if they had an idea for a movie and they shot the appropriate scenes, and then someone maybe they lost the storyboards or the script, and so the editor had no reference point to work from. I don't know. Some of it gets a pass because, like Nathan said, the good stuff like the atmosphere, the setting, and certainly those slasher style set pieces near the end are done with a certain aplomb. The final 10 minutes is nearly operatic in its violent set pieces, but I don't know. I think any sense of mystery or plot building feels half-baked at best. Moreover, I think Jenny Newman, like you said, Justin, as Kathy/Helen, I think she's a ravishing screen presence, but I don't necessarily think she had the acting chops to tackle such a conflicted character. She almost seems like a deer in headlights at times, and it may not necessarily be attributed to her thespian skills in so much that it may just be shoddy direction as not to get into too much background right off the bat, but my understanding is the director may not have been involved for artistic integrity, but for an easy paycheck. I think he came in kind of last minute. I could be wrong there, but we'll get to that. But anyway, I think at the end of the day, Nightmares, it just feels to me like it's a story worth telling and the elements are there, but I don't know. For whatever reason, not everyone involved was on the same page. That's what it kind of feels like. It's a movie that I want to like more than I actually like. For example, the opening scene with the car crash, it sets up a story worth telling, but they never quite stick the landing. You do have a surface level mystery element with a POV, and they even kind of cloak the killer at points. But the resolution is so obvious. There's no one it could possibly be other than Jenny Newman's character. So there's no real mystery there. It just feels flat and kind of uninspired. Or maybe like they were setting us up for a twist that was never really realized. And, we may as well go with the obvious resolution is what they would probably say to themselves. etc. So thumbs sideways. I didn't dislike the film, and it's perfectly watchable, especially those last 10 or 15 minutes. That's great. But I think ultimately my thoughts are kind of summed up much more succinctly with some of our listener feedback, which we'll get to later. But I don't know. It just exists for me without being forgettable or memorable. So take from that what you will.
Okay, well, thank you. I agree. We won't get into background later, but it is all a bit haphazard, and I think the director kind of admitted that. It's things like plot points like the wardrobe mistress or the kind of the manager of the theatre is murdered, and they all go, "Oh, isn't that terrible?" And then they still go ahead with the play the next night. And you were thinking, surely if there'd been a brutal murder in a theatre, it would all been locked down by the police.
I have one word for you, Justin. Eyeball.
I know. But come to you, Erik, in a moment. But what it did remind me, I did love the acting of the little girl at the beginning because she's so terrible. And especially when she's kind of supposed to be looking like really kind of traumatized, and she's got her bottom lip jutting out, and she looks like she's going to throw a tantrum. And it kind of reminded me of you, Erik. I don't know why. Why would that be?
How rude.
So what did you think of Nightmares, Erik? Was it your first time?
No, I actually bought this on DVD about 10 years ago. Severin bought it out in the States, so I still have that DVD, which does have Jenny Newman wielding a shard of glass on the front cover, ruining any chance of it, being a whodunit, as you said. But it's pretty clear Now, I never saw it back in the day, so I never saw those cut versions. So my first time watching it was the widescreen uncut version. So I've always kind of liked this one. I'm kind of with Nathan. I think it's kind of fun. I do agree with you, Justin. I think it's really weird that they play it like a whodunit, even though it's not a whodunit. I'm wondering if they intended it to be a mystery, because even the back of the sleeve of the Severin release describes the film as an Ozploitation giallo. And a giallo would seem to imply to me that it's a whodunit, it's a mystery, but this one isn't. But the weird thing is they shoot all the murder scenes as if it's a mystery. I mean, we see a gloved hand, we'd never see the face of who's doing the killing, lots of POV shots, but at the same time they're making it obvious as well that it's Helen doing the killing. But I imagine when I've watched this first, I was expecting a major ludicrous twist ending where Helen takes off a mask like at the end of Happy Birthday to Me and it's somebody else, because even the fact that she's changed her name, but it's never explained why, because she's Kathy when she's the sulky, not terribly good actress at the start, and then suddenly she's Helen, which I'm assuming was trying to throw people off, saying, okay, it's obviously not the same girl. So it feels really clumsily done, because on one hand it's playing like a whodunit, on the other hand it's just patently obvious who's doing the killing. But having said that, I thought it is kind of entertaining. I think this is as close as I can think of off the top of my head of the Aussies getting as close to the slasher film. And what's weird is it's really kind of Friday the 13th-ish, which is just a coincidence, because it would have been out around the same time as the first Friday the 13th. It's certainly a lot more exploitation-y, if that's a word, than Halloween, which as you said is probably the main influence behind it. The amount of nudity in the film, it was a surprise. Early on there's that couple who are just completely starkers in the alleyway getting it on. Talk about not being able to control yourself. And then later on, Faye and Bruce, who are having sex on a sewing table, which I kept worrying about, will it sustain their weight of two people going at it hammer and tongs on this sewing table? But not to worry, because somebody comes along and kills them. And actually what was really fun for me is that you were mentioning, Justin, about seeing familiar faces if you've watched any Australian television growing up. Well, I used to be obsessed with Neighbours, and the Faye, who plays the wardrobe lady who has to run around in the nude getting stabbed, is played by Sue Jones, who was Pam Willis on Neighbours. Now, Neighbours, if you've never seen it, guys, in the States, is probably the tamest, most family-friendly soap opera there is. It's almost like a kid's show.
Is that the one with that guy?
Alan Dale. It is indeed. She would have been, yes, she would have been friends with Alan Dale, I'm sure, back in the day. And they probably told him, I was in a movie. He was probably telling her tales of houseboat horror, and she'd be saying, I got to run around an alleyway naked being chased by somebody with a shard of glass, and I had to stop to vomit, and it was really glamorous. I really loved it. Well, that's kind of why I like the film, is that it's Snapshot was brought up there earlier, and Snapshot is a very kind of serious and slow moving drama rather than a slasher, whereas this one is the complete opposite. It's let's get these actors' clothes off as soon as possible and get them murdered as soon as possible, and let's throw in blood and sleazy people like the theatre critic. So the film does have a high body count, and I thought it entertained. As I said, I'm a bit perplexed about why the bulk of the movie plays like a whodunit when it's not a whodunit. I'm wondering if that was if there's some kind of production trouble behind the scenes, maybe, or something, or just a very poorly written script. Because I'm sort of half convinced when I watch it that it's meant to be a mystery, but then I'm thinking, but no, it's not a mystery. It's not. Even the poster art declares it not being a mystery. But I thought it was really solid and really entertaining. And as I said, this is probably Ozploitation's most slasher-esque export for me. It's as close as they got to a Friday the 13th or a Halloween. In terms of its structure, and that it's certainly not as good as either of those, but I thought it was pretty darn entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I do love Australian horror movies. They always have that kind of, there's a sense of camp to them as well, wasn't there? I mean, with this, you could tell a lot of the actors were having a lot of fun with this movie. And also, of course, the Brian May, who did music, he did music for lots of Australian films. Of course, he's not Brian May from Queen, but the same named Brian May from Australia, who did the almost like a parody of Bernard Herrmann-esque score, didn't he? It was like the whole thing was just like a riff on the Psycho score. So it was just like, I mean, even more so than say the score for something like Reanimator, which is kind of parodying it as well. And this, it's just like so insistent. But it's kind of like, it's an enigma really why they did the way, you have all those sequences where it is all shot from POV. I mean, obviously that's also to, I presume, sort of like, obviously maybe Jenny Newman probably wasn't there for those scenes anyway. But as we get to background, I think that will be explained a little bit going in. But obviously it also set itself up for a sequel, didn't it? Which never happened, unfortunately.
There's a couple of points I wanted to bring up, and I think Nathan brought them up. One was the when the character is wearing that giant mask and he sneaks up on the other character in the theater. It kind of reminded me of the other stage fright with Irving Wallace wearing the oversized mask. I wonder if they got inspiration from that point, because they're both giant masks and they're set in a theater and both are called stage fright. So it's kind of a weird little coincidence.
I think it's possible, because I think the Michele Soavi's kind of in the stage fright, it was definitely like with more of an eye on the American slasher. But of course, this was aping the American slasher, which in going back, have you ever seen the Flesh and Blood show, the Pete Walker movie?
Oh, yes.
But I'm not sure, did we ever cover that on the show? I'm not sure if we have.
Nope, not yet.
We should run with it at some stage. Pete Walker.
Oh dear.
God.
Thank you very much.
I mean, that seemed almost like it was an inspiration for this movie, more so in so much that movie was also, Pete Walker came from a sexploitation background, so did John D. Lamond as well. So that had like that was set with a theatre troupe on a theatre at the end of a pier being murdered one by one by kind of a mad killer from I can't remember, I think it's 1970 something, early 70s. So a British film. So that seemed like an inspiration for this as much as Halloween. And obviously it's been filmed through the lens of Halloween, even down to the kind of the Panaglide. It's not the same system, but it's very, the camera moves very, there's great shots of the POV of the killer chasing people through the theatre using the kind of Panaglide system, which, it looks really good. But as far as it's whether or not inspiration for stage fright, I wouldn't put it past him. I think Michele Soavi was obviously, he earned his background. I mean, working sort of with Joe D'Amato and Dario Argento on films before he got, and I think he was a fan of horror cinema. So yes, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he kind of took some inspiration from that. And of course, the theatre itself is a perfect background for a slasher movie, isn't it? It's kind of, and in fact, actually, not ironically, but given we're talking about Scream, was it Scream 2 that did the whole kind of Greek theatre thing, didn't it? The tragedy where Sidney Prescott was on stage, wasn't she? And then they was playing with that, and it's those kind of places where I think it's got that great kind of juxtaposition between having places that, like, when a play is on, you've got hundreds of people in the cinema, in the theatre, and when the play's not on, you've just got a few people or rehearsals, and there's so many places for the killer to hide and all these kind of things. But yeah, it's sort of. But did you have any background, Joseph, or anything else you wanted to say before we move on to background?
Yeah, I do have some background, but one more scene I wanted to mention, and this is something else Nathan brought up, was that scene with the naked girl being killed in the rain with the glass shard. I thought that was shot very well, and I love the rainy atmosphere, but I'm wondering if Erik laughed at the scene where she gets her ass slashed.
Why would I laugh at that? That's insinuation that I'm immature, and I'm not. I'm all sophisticated.
I'm not insinuating anything, Erik.
Well, I want to know is which stage fright had the worst play within the film. Michele Soavi's one or this one? Because both of them look like they're dreadful.
Oh, I think the one Michele did, I think it looks great because of that wailing saxophone solos and the dancing. Yeah. I think it looks phenomenal. This one kind of looked like a cheesy kind of drama. It didn't really wow me either way.
No, yeah, I would agree.
yeah, it's just so all over the place, isn't it? It's, I mean, it just one little bit of background just maybe explains. I think Jenny Newman came to the production very late because Mickey Rourke's girlfriend was meant to do the role and dropped out at the last minute. So I think Jenny Newman was literally just kind of flown in at the last minute, which may explain why she didn't really get a handle on her character or was a bit at sea with it, perhaps. Because I think her only other acting was in was it kind of Queen of the Apes or something like that? There was kind of like a sexploitation movie where she goes somewhere on searching for a lost race of ape men and has sex with them.
Who? Jenny Newman?
Yeah, she was. Let me see what the.
No, she was in V. She went on to do V as well, the miniseries V from the 80s.
Yeah, so she went on to obviously Hell Night after this, which is obviously Mistress of the Apes in 1979, which has the where's the synopsis? Is that the wife of a famous anthropologist is rushed to hospital in labour. At the same time, druggies raid the hospital looking for drugs, causing the baby to be stillborn. While recovering from the trauma, she learns that her husband has disappeared in Africa. She launches an expedition to find him, discovers the bizarre world of sexy jungle women.
Wow.
That's what a synopsis. So that was her kind of her main film before this. So I think because this was shot in the late part of 1979, so she would have just probably finished that movie and gone straight over to pick up on this. But sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Joseph, what background did you dig up on this one?
Well, it was released to VHS in the States primarily on the Vid America label in 1984. That particular tape features a trailer for The Riddle of the Sands from 1979. Apparently 4 different theater venues were used during production to create the illusion of the singular theater setting here. The young Helen Selick, or Kathy, or whoever you want to call her, was portrayed by director John Lamond's daughter, Jenny. Co-writer Colin Eggleston was an uncredited writer on the 1984 film Innocent Prey, which he also directed. He also wrote and directed the little scene 1988 Australian slasher Cassandra. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. That's pretty good. Co-writer John Michael Howson also plays Bennett in the film, the critic, and he had a role in another slasher film from Down Under. He played Jay in Houseboat Horror from 1989.
He was young, cool, and groovy.
Yes, he was. But that's all the background I have, Justin.
Okay, well, thank you. Nathan, how about you? What have you got for us?
Nothing.
Been waiting to hear that.
Actually, Jenny Newman was in Hell Night.
Ah.
Wow.
She gets decapitated.
Well, thank you for that, Nathan. Erik, how about you?
Yes, there's a 1981 film called Hell Night, and Jenny Newman is in that, and she gets decapitated.
Well, we got a new Alan Dale joke on our hands.
Yeah, no, I have a few things to add to what Joseph has already said. As well as producing the film, Colin Eggleston, who directed one of my favourite Aussie films, Long Weekend, he did some reshoots on this film as well. At the start, there is a scene where that nudie couple are killed. They're having sex in the alleyway. That was an additional scene that was put in there, kind of obviously to bump up the body count of that, because though they're the only 2 people in the film that have nothing to do with the production of the play. They're just kind of thrown in there randomly at the start to be killed off. So that scene was directed by Colin Eggleston. Deborah Fuhr was the name of that actress you were referring to there, Justin. She was the girlfriend of Mickey Rourke, and she was scheduled to play the role of Helen, but she was in a car accident, I think the week before filming was to start, so she had to pull out, so to speak. The director, John Lamond, he directed this back-to-back with another feature film called Pacific Banana. So he shot Pacific Banana first, then he shot Stage Fright. I've never seen Pacific Banana, but the trailer for it is on the Severn DVD. They've got kind of a trailer reel of John Lamond movies, and it looks horrendous. It's one of those, it's a sex comedy, and it's set in I think it's set in an airport or something, and one of the characters has trouble getting an erection, and that's the impetus to the storyline. It looks dreadful though. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just getting a wrong impression from the trailer, but it's not something I'm going to be seeking out. I think I'll stick with Nightmares. On the director's commentary on the disc, there's a commentary with the director and also with Mark Hartley, who directed the brilliant Not Quite Hollywood documentary, which, if you haven't seen, is excellent. An excellent overview of Ozploitation. He again, I can't remember, I was discussing recently somebody saying Halloween was a really gory film, but John Lamond accuses Halloween of being really gory on the commentary track. And I'm just like, oh, will these people just not watch Halloween and tell me whereabouts is this gore that they keep seeing? And finally, he also mentions on the commentary track that the critic's character is called Bennett Collingwood in the film, and in reality, in Australia at the time, there was a art critic, a film critic called Colin Bennett. So this is Bennett Collingwood, and then it's sort of mocking the real life Colin Bennett, who apparently was really mean and nasty about Ozploitation movies and John Lamond films in particular. So they decided to have a little dig at him in this film, and that's how they did it. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. I think I've read an interview with the director, and he sort of he kind of pretty much fessed up to the fact that this was inspired by Halloween. I think it may be, Joseph, you were saying about how whether or not it was something that was rushed in production. Apparently, it kind of was. I think a little bit. I'm not an expert on this, but I think there was a similar thing with tax rebates or kind of tax systems, like they had, like the tax shelter sort of industry that gave us all My Bloody Valentine in Canada and all those great Canadian horror movies of the late 70s and early 80s. And I think there was a similar thing here, and there was some apparently. Somebody had, I think the budget was between 200 and 500,000 Australian dollars, and the person who was going to invest the money was just basically saying, I need this to be made by this point, and if you don't make it, I'll find someone else who will. So as you said about John Lamond kind of coming in as a last minute kind of to do this, so that everything was rushed pretty much, and which explains why the film is a bit disjointed. And I think the interview I saw with him, he was saying, because he's passed away not that long ago, I don't think, but he was saying that he kind of he said it was a shame because he thought he could have made a better movie if he had more time. So there was obviously sense it was being rushed. It didn't get released theatrically in the United States or the UK, but it was appearing on TV in the United States in around the same time you said it came out on video, Joseph, in sort of mid 80s. But I think it did get a theatrical release in Australia, and so certainly the trailer we played suggests it did. Now, I think there's a great website called ozmovies.com.au, and it has a breakdown and background on a lot of these movies that came out, obviously Australian movies, and it says that it thinks it kind of made it was regarded as a flop basically, and it made 168,000 Australian dollars, which was obviously less than its budget, and it seemed that most of that would have come from drive-in theatre bookings rather than what they call hard tops, or like sort of cinemas. But the film was subsequently sold to 30 territories, including the UK, United States, and Japan. What else was there? I think we sort of mentioned about the theatres, and I think that there is some kind of mention in the film about sort of like the kind of sort of the whole thing about don't whistle in a theatre, it's bad luck. Don't wear green in a theatre, it's bad luck. But one of the theatres, the Princess Theatre in Melbourne, was one of the places that actually has a famous ghost, or apparently a famous ghost of a baritone called Frederick Baker, who went under the stage name of Frederick Frederiki. And on the 3rd of March 1888, he was performing the role of Mephistopheles in the opera Faust. During the thing, he would sink dramatically through a trapdoor in the stage, returning to the fires of hell. But as he was lowered down into the stage during a performance, he had a heart attack and died almost immediately. But no one realised. So when everyone came back on to back on stage to take their bows, he wasn't there, which is something that they kind of do in the film when the director's murdered, and they kind of wonder where he is. So apparently, many people have since claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of Frederick Frederiki in the evening dress at the theatre. And for many years, a seat in the dress circle was kept vacant in his honour in case he came back. So that was just like a little fun sort of fact from that. I'm seeing if there was anything else. I think we've pretty much mentioned sort of everything else that we had. This apparently, apart from Gary Sweet, who is still kind of quite a popular Australian actor now. He described the film in glowing terms. I think it's his actorial acting debut. He said the film was terrible and diabolical.
Put that on the poster.
Exactly. I think it's pretty much that's all the background I have. So, Joseph, what was the consensus from our dear listeners?
Well, this might be our lowest collection of comments since the early Frost episode, which is another film from Down Under. Only 11 comments for this one, unfortunately, but from that, Carl Lito writes, one of the few films from my country that I actually enjoyed watching. The energetic cinematography, relentless music, bonkers plot, and hilarious supporting characters all add up to a full night's entertainment. Give me this over the endlessly government-funded art house films any day of the week. And David C. Millay says, and this is, this succinctly sums up the film for me. Not the best stage fright, but not the worst. Not the best nightmares, but not the worst. I agree with you, David. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Listen on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and about a billion other podcatchers. If you like what we do and who doesn't, then consider supporting the show over on Patreon. We also have a severely outdated Redbubble shop, which I hope to update sometime this spring. It's all one Google search away, or you can check out Linktree, a period between the R and the double E's there, and a / The Hysteria Continues for all appropriate links. General feedback or questions, you know where to send it. thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And, I kind of guess, Erik, do you have a joke of the week for us?
Yes, you lucky things.
It's my joke of the week. It's so bright and fantastic.
What do you call a scary Australian dessert that keeps coming back to you? A boomerang. Meringue.
Oh, good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for quality. Always quality.
I had another one as well. What do you call a crazy Australian singing psychopath? Kylie Minogue.
I quite like that one.
Two good ones, Erik.
Of course, Kylie Minogue was in Australian Slasher, wasn't she? She was in Cut.
Which is not a bad film.
No. I remember when it came out, because I think it was kind of just after the, obviously all the post-Scream movies were kind of dying off a bit by that point, weren't they? So, but it was kind of one of those ones that I look forward to as something they've explored a lot more with that kind of slightly supernatural feel of like the killer inside the film type thing, which they did with like Final Girls and The Hills Run Red and those kind of movies that came a bit later. So, but I'm sure we'll get around to that one at some point. And also, you mentioned Cassandra, Joseph. It's one I don't think I've ever seen, but I know it's a slasher movie, isn't it?
I would classify it as a slasher film. It's not as heavy on the slasher aspect, but it is a slasher film. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I'm going to want to catch up with soon, actually. And there's another one that I think it's got Symphony of Terror. I think it's Symphony of Terror, which was from the late 80s, which was very Halloween influenced.
Yeah, a.k.a. Coda.
Coda, that's right, yeah. So that's a fun one, so very heavily. And, of course, there's, Australia did do quite a few. There's Blood Moon as well. I'm not sure if we did that one either, but about the murders at that kind of a school where there's a killer with, I think, sort of garrots people with barbed wire. There's a lot of those kind of, Australia did produce a lot of horror movies, kind of slasher movies. So I'm sure we'll get around to more of them as we go on. And of course, we covered the record-breaking Early Frost, which is possibly the most obscure movie we've ever covered on the podcast.
We have a commentary track currently on the Australian slasher classic Snapshot.
Huge body count on that one.
And the only slasher movie, well, I say slasher movie in inverted commas, because I think 88 didn't even release it under the slasher banner, but is the only film was the killer drives an ice cream truck that I know of anyway. But anyway, it's out now, so yeah, look that up. Okay, what are we covering next time?
Yes, it's my pick, and we are going to Death Valley.
Well, so we're staying with the early 80s next time. So, well, join us on the Hysteria Continues. And I think I'm going to play out, I thought, well, what Susie songs have got Nightmare in it? And I thought, no, I'm not going to choose a Susie song, Erik.
So you're going to choose Creatures instead?
I'm not. I'm going to go for something completely left field for me, but it's Frankie Valli, The Night.
Oh, yes, I like that song.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening to the Hysteria Continues, and we'll catch you next time. We head off to Death Valley for some, for some more early 80s slasher thrills. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Arrivederci.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
The night begins to turn.